So first thing, thank you so much for your patience with the yellow dig thing. I think it is fixed. It sounds, we had a meeting this morning. It sounds like it was like a growing pain thing since it's the new version. Yeah, so I am sorry that that was a miserable, frustrating thing. I think it's fixed. I am trying to go through and comment on everyone's posts. That's something I try to do. If I miss yours, please do not be offended. The way it sorts, since it sorts by whichever one was commented on last, I've not yet figured out a system to make sure I don't miss one that someone else comments and then they move around. So if I miss yours, it's not like, oh, he must not have liked it enough to even bother to say anything. That's not it. And if I miss it, if you're like, oh, he's commented on everyone else's and I would really like some input, feel free to email me and be like, hey, can you give me some feedback on mine? I'm trying to get all of them, but it's kind of tough to keep track of. Along those lines, when I grade those, there's probably a way I can, but I don't know how to put comments in Blackboard for something that you didn't turn in Blackboard. So if you want more feedback, ask. I will try to reply to your post and give you feedback there because I think that's really important. I just didn't want anyone feeling like, oh, he doesn't even read them or he didn't like mine. It just got mixed up. And so a bit tough to keep track of. That being said, if you also, because we're getting to like your first thing that I'll grade soon, if I make a mistake, let me know because that happens fairly often. And I am generally a pretty quick grader. So if it's been like a week or something, you're like, wow, is he just like not doing anything anymore? I probably didn't see it or something happened. So feel free to email me. I remember having those classes where like, are they going to grade anything this entire semester? I'm not one of those. I grade it pretty quick. So if it's been a few days and you're just like, man, he hasn't graded it. I may have missed it. You know, if you put it in the discussion board or in Yellow Dig where you're supposed to, I just didn't see it or whatever. Feel free to email me. I'm not going to be offended. Like, how dare you question that I could miss grading something, because it happens at least once a week, if not more often. So any questions with that stuff before we move on to things much more interesting? Awesome. Oh, wait. Okay, so with us this evening, we have Dr. Emily Bretl. Emily was a classmate of mine through our doctoral program through Northern Colorado. Neither one of us was ever actually in Colorado all that much. She has literally taught all over the world. And I don't know if you guys have like ever met the kind of people that it seems like they've been everywhere. Emily has lived everywhere. Like, you'll be talking about somewhere and she's like, oh yeah, I lived there for 3 months or something. And just to like a quick story that I think gives you an example of the kind of person she is. The first year I took students to Rocky Mountain National Park, I had another sponsor from my school who bailed on me at the last minute, which is always a super cool thing to do. And on like 2 weeks or less notice, Emily, I not only agreed to go as a sponsor on a trip, she drove from Denver up to Estes Park to be a sponsor for kids that weren't even her students, just to help out, and did an amazing job. And it was, and at the time, you were a consultant, right? An educational consultant. and just like immediately like flipped into teacher mode, and did an amazing job. And that's one of the things that's always impressed me with her work, is we're both people that are very interested in science, but she always manages to see things that I never would. One idea I wanted to introduce really quickly, and then I'll be quiet and leave you all alone, is an idea called forms of representation. And it's really an idea from Elliot Eisner, and you'll read a couple of his things. I don't remember if it's next week or the week after. And it's not important that you really know where it comes from, but the basis of the idea is that there are many different ways that students or just people can represent their learning and show their learning, show the meaning they give it, show their understanding. And a lot of times, especially in traditional school settings, we go to like, you take a test, you write a paper, you make a Google slideshow. Those are kind of the big three right now. That there's these like, these are the things you do, but there's many other ways of representing your learning or understanding. And as I was thinking about it earlier today, to try to give you a good like actual example, the musical Hamilton is a wonderful example of Lin-Manuel Miranda and Alex Lacamoire and the other folks that work on writing it. Like that came from their understanding of this biography of Alexander Hamilton, right? So they have this biography, and in school we probably would have like assigned them a book report, but they end up with this entire musical. And if you've seen it, there's no question watching it that you're like, oh, they understand the historical significance, they understand all these factors that were going on. And so it's representing their understanding and their learning, but it's in a little bit different format. And so I just want to introduce that because I know a lot of times when we think about assessment or evaluation, it's tests and grades. And that's just like a very tiny skimming the surface part of it. And my bias is, I think a lot of those things end up being meaningless, or not nearly as meaningful as we think they are. And so that's part of why I want to give you the chances to get exposed to some other ways of thinking about how we can not only provide deeper learning experiences for students, but also kind of look at their experiences a little bit differently. So anyway, that's a very short version. And I know there's some folks that would absolutely hate my very short version of that, but none of them are here, so we're okay. Anyway, I will be quiet and we will let Dr. Emily Bretl start talking, and feel free to stick any questions in the chat or interrupt her because she's patient, and I've not seen her yell, I don't think ever.
I thought you were going to say because she talks too much, so you might have to interrupt her.
No, I didn't.
All right, I'm going to share my screen to try to keep me on track for you all. So let's get this up. Get everybody set up here. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Thanks for taking the time out of your evening to join the class. I know that these times are just so different and have so many demands on us from so many different directions. So really glad that you're here. So this will be an introduction to arts integration in science education. Now, it'll kind of do like I'll be trying to give you a lot of examples, not tons of the theory behind why and how, but just to sort of start helping you wrap your mind around what arts integration can be in science education in particular. But what's really great about this is that, you know, if you, for example, Sandy said she loves reading, a lot of these things are going to be able to be applied in that topic of your passion as well. I have yet to find a place that arts-based integration doesn't make the learning better for everybody. And even if you're saying to yourself, look, I'm not an arts person, I've also found that even for people who don't feel that they are, you know, artists or artful, that they can find a way to enter into this as well. All right, so just so that you have a clear idea of where we're going, again, like I said, it's just to introduce you to these ideas through examples and then practical application. So I'll introduce myself in a little more depth. We'll do a quick warm-up that is arts integrated, and then we'll work through some definitions and big ideas, and then of course we'll do some practices. Really do feel free to interrupt at any point. I'll do my best to check the chat, but Dr. Clay, if you happen to see anything pop up in the chat and you want to bring it to my attention, that's awesome. And then really I put the requests and needs in there if you need a more specific example, or you want me to dive more deeply into something, or even after the fact, you know, after this session ends, if there are other things that you're interested in learning about, I'm here to support you as well. So again, this is me, I'm Dr. B. It's really fun to be able to say that. If any of you ever take on the journey of getting your doctorate, you are a little bit crazy, but it's also really fun and exciting. So here on the screen that you see is really my philosophy of education and in many ways life. So I really see that within teaching, we are able to find the places to show our students beauty, and that it is really all over. As a science teacher, I feel like that's something I get to bring up every single day, but I also think that beauty, cliche as it may be, is in the eye of the beholder. So we're all able to really bring those things we're passionate about to our students with real grace and artistry. And I really genuinely believe everything is interesting, whether it's students' questions, the weird stuff that they do, whether it's the accidents that take place when you're trying to run an experiment, or when stuff goes perfect. All of that is really interesting. Personally, I spend a lot of time outdoors. I'm an environmental scientist by training. Both my bachelor's and master's are in environmental science. Found my way into teaching somewhat accidentally, and pretty much realized I had no idea why I was doing anything else, and have been teaching science and working as a science specialist and project-based learning specialist for the last 10 years. That all really ties into this idea that, to me, teaching is artistry. So like I said, if you're sitting there going, I am not an artist, I am not artful, you know, that's fine. You don't have to believe it. I do. That's my philosophy. You probably have your own framework that you look at the world through. This is one that I have yet to be able to let go of. And it really plays into what we'll be talking about tonight. All right, so to warm up, we're going to do a game called, well, I call it the no name game. If you choose to use it in your classroom, you are more than welcome to give it its own cheesy name. Does not bother me. That's also a good place to say anything that I share with you here, you are more than welcome to steal it, take it, reuse it, rename it, put it into your teaching, put it into your projects, all fine by me and fair game. So you will need for this a paper, a pencil, and then I have the object this time. If you are doing this with students, your students would need to go out and find an object, but I will be the object holder this time. I typically do this project, I'm just doing a little bit of setup. I typically do this project, or this warm up, in either small groups, or pairs are really great because it allows everybody to interact and really play a role. But you can also see in this example how you can do this with a bigger group as well. So the objective of this is that there will be one person describing and one other person, or everyone else in this case, will be drawing. And the objective is to create a drawing that matches the unseen object using clear description and careful listening. At no point, if you're the describer, may you say what the object is or does. So for example, like I couldn't be like, draw a cell phone, haha, this was the object. Like that's not how it works. You can't say what it is or what it does. So you also can't say like, I talk on it and I make phone calls with it. That's not it. All right, so does everybody have a paper and a pencil? You can nod or like give me a thumbs up, or cool. Okay, so I'm gonna have you draw this to scale because it is something that fits in the palm of my hand, and so it will most likely fit on the size of the paper that you're drawing. So first, I want you to make a circle that is about just a little less than an inch around, like in circumference, or sorry, not in circumference, in diameter. So just make a circle that is about an inch or a little less than an inch in diameter. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and then what I want you to do is on the top of that circle, you're going to make, we're gonna call it like kind of a rectangle, but round all the edges. So like a really squashed ellipses, or I think a rectangle with the edges kind of softened is the best. And it's gonna be a little bit wider than the circle that you drew. And if you want me to be more specific, if the circle was about an inch across, this little squished, softened edged rectangle is going to stick out over each side of the circle by about 1/4 of an inch. And that rectangle can be about also 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. I want you to make all over that little rectangle, I want you to make a bunch of little like triangles and diamonds, and they can overlap, but just sort of you're creating a texture across that whole top. So at this point, there's nothing in the circle. We're only working in the little kind of rectangle part. And again, it's a rectangle with softened edges. So you're just putting lots of little triangles, tiny triangles. They can be diamonds. They can overlap. They don't have to be perfect. Okay, and then in the very middle of that rectangle part, towards the top, I want you to make a line coming up, like straight up, and make it sort of a little bit thick. Like it's about, I don't know, like kind of like trying to see something on me that's that width. I don't know. It's about 1/8 of an inch. Apparently I'm a carpenter now. Okay. And I'm going to give you one more detail. This could go on and on. I'm not going to carry it out too long. At the very bottom of the circle part, so that very first part that I had you do, I actually want you to kind of make it into a little bit of a point. So instead of it being just a perfect circle rounded, take that very bottom of it and make it into like the most delicate little point that you could. Okay. Now I have no idea, I tried my best to describe this. I actually realized I chose an object that's a bit, I don't know, kind of hard to describe. Does anybody have any idea what I might be holding in my hand? Looking at your picture.
I know what it is.
Amber's laughing, and that's never a good thing. Well, that's actually what's interesting about yours, Amber, is that would make a really good view from a different angle. So I think I either misdescribed something or you heard something differently than I meant. Dr. Clay, would you like to give a guess at what I was describing?
It's an acorn.
What? You're good. You're actually really good.
You're a lemon, because last time you did this, it was a lemon.
Oh,
apparently you ate that.
I pick things up that are laying around my house when I play this.
No, my thought was a ornament, and I was like, a little TV on an ornament, maybe.
But you actually, if I hold this up, what you drew is almost like from this angle. So pretty cool. But awesome. So the whole point of this game isn't necessarily to have everything turn out perfectly. It's really to practice the describing and the listening. And what I want to point out here is that just that game, this no-name game or whatever you want to call it, is super fun as a warm-up to get kids doing when they come into the classroom. You could turn an entire class lesson into it, but it's also very closely connected to a bunch of the next generation science standards, which are also applicable into the Kansas science standards. But so everything from engineering and design, so developing a simple sketch, drawing, and doing physical modeling, to pieces where you could have chosen an object that really had students thinking about the form and the function. So really, maybe they had already been learning a little bit about that and they're using some of that language to describe and help you draw. Maybe you're getting into, things like seed production or survival and growth, and you want to draw that in. So what's really fun about some of these arts integrated pieces is that they seem, not always, but they can seem rather fluffy. But what's really cool is that they very quickly can be tied to the stuff you have to teach anyways, but in a way that the students and you, like, I'm hoping that you either thought that was ridiculous, and that's great because I'm okay with you thinking it's ridiculous, or you thought, hey, that was actually a bit fun and goofy. And that's also good because if a teacher's having fun, the students are having fun. But then also showing you that, hey, we can also connect those directly to the standards that we have to teach. Now I'll say straight up that I will do my best to point out the standards that I was thinking of for the activities and the examples I'm going to share with you tonight. But I also think that there are so many other ways you could think about it. So don't get stuck on my examples and recognize you might see it a different way. I might have different knowledge that you don't have. You definitely have different knowledge than I do. So you might be able to make connections in a different way. And that's really the fun part about the arts integrated piece for me, is that it really moves more into that interdisciplinary realm than just saying, this is science or this is social studies. All right. Cool, so just a little bit, we won't dive into this. There's so much theory around this if you find yourself interested in this. I did my dissertation on the artistry of ecological place-based education. So I was particularly interested in teachers as artists and what that looks like in their practice. And so in education, we throw these words around all the time, especially the word creativity, right? We have entire frameworks around creativity. Artistry is something we don't talk about as much, but we definitely know what that might mean or might have a sense of it. So just so that we're on the same page, when I'm talking about artistry, I'm talking about using your skills and knowledge and personality to carry out a task, to do something, to respond to a situation with grace, intellect, intuition, imagination, and flexibility. And so this is kind of a definition I've crafted that's based on a lot of research out there. I've got a couple of the sources down there. I think of artistry as more of an attitude, just so that you're clear. To me, it's more of an attitude. It's like a way of being, a way of thinking. Then creativity is starts with that same skills, knowledge, and personality, but it's about doing something differently, making something novel, or something that's particularly useful in a field. It's really defined by complexity. That's one of the few things that we really know for sure about creativity. And to me, creativity is more the action piece. So artistry is that attitude, creativity is the action. And so this goes back to, like I said, my philosophy of education. Of course, that teaching is artistry. But what I think is really important about this is that anybody can be artful. Everybody has an artistry of some kind. It might be that you are the world's greatest 5th grade social studies teacher because that is your passion. And when your students hear you up in the front of the room or moving around or sharing examples, they're going, man, that teacher is a good teacher. Maybe it's that you know exactly how to do a read aloud to get all the students engaged, and that is your artistry. So there's a lot of different ways to be artful, but everybody can be artful by honoring your interests and your strengths. And then that helps you to cultivate your own weaknesses or challenges as a teacher. The other really cool part about focusing on these and really learning to incorporate arts-based teaching methods is that creative teachers create creative students. And that's not something that I'm just saying because I'm like, I want you to do this. That's actually backed by research. That the more creative and artful a teacher is in their classroom, the more that students will take risks, the more that students will try new things, the more that students will say, I never thought of it that way. And it's all about how the attitude of one teacher, that person that they're looking up to, can really shape the way that the entire class operates. So that, just keep that in mind, that creative, artistic teachers, whatever artistry means to you, cultivate and encourage creative and artistic students. So that you have a very clear definition, this is just straight from one of the, I'd say, more popular definitions of what is arts integration. And I'll pause to say, I'll send you all this PowerPoint, so if there's any things you really want, you'll definitely, don't worry about capturing every single word on it. But arts integration, it's an approach to teaching in which students construct and demonstrate understanding through an art form. Tricky thing is defining an art form, which, according to Eisner, for example, can be defined in so many ways. Those forms of representation, how we actually define art, has a lot of variation. Within arts-based integration, students engage in a creative process, which connects an art form and another subject and meets evolving objectives in both. It's teaching through the arts. And I want to emphasize that because it's very easy when using arts-based methods to get lost in like the shiny bling of the arts part of it. It's really easy to, create a project where you're making the most dynamic mobile that moves in different pieces, or you're creating this work of art. And then by the time you finish it, you're going, what am I even trying to assess their knowledge of, or what was I hoping they would show? So it's not just arts. It's really about being clear and being able to say, this is going to help me teach what I need to teach, just in a different way, through a different form of representation, a different way of knowing and expressing understanding.
It's something I'll add really quick. Have I told you guys my paper pumpkin example yet? Okay, my kids should be in bed, so I think I'm safe. They both came home from one of their science activities at school, and they had made these paper plate pumpkins. They're excited about them. So I did tell you. Anyway, it was art. Like they, not like art that's going in a museum anywhere. I mean, they have my fine motor skills, which is 0. And they were excited about it. But when they came home, as you're talking about, there wasn't, and they were calling it science. There wasn't any sort of like scientific process there. So they made the thing, but they weren't like representing, oh, we cut this thing apart and learned about it by pulling all the pieces out and observing them. And then that's what we tried to show in our model. It was steps by step of how to make this thing. So they got really focused on the end product. And then in the process, it kind of lost a lot of meaning. And that's one that I want to point out, because you'll work with teachers that will think that way. Mm-hmm. And you'll have to be pretty intentional, especially when you're new. Like when you're new, it's just like, I'm going along with whatever everyone else is doing. I'm just putting my head down and not drawing attention to myself. But that's something I have to be intentional about, is really thinking like, just because that's what they're doing, is it really representing the learning that was supposed to be happening there? And as you get more confident, that's something that you'll hopefully be able to call out and be like, is that really doing what we're wanting it to? But you will work with people who will kind of miss the point. They'll miss the forest for the trees sort of thing. So it's just something I want to make sure you're aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the flip side, I would say, is having done a lot of teacher training around science education and project-based learning in particular, for science education, there's the other side too, where if you're not comfortable with science, or if you yourself are really still trying to dial in your own scientific knowledge and understanding, it can be very exciting to get lost in the projects and the beauty of the things that you create. And it can be also very helpful for your own professional development to write yourself out clear rubrics, whether you use those with your students or not, but where you're saying, okay, this is what we're doing. When I get that final piece, or when I check in on the work that they're doing, here's what I'm checking for, and here's how it connects to the things, whether you actually end up using national or state standards at the schools that you teach at, or already are, for those of you who are already teaching, or even if you have more flexibility, it can still be a great practice to say, what are we doing? I mean, there's definitely places to just play and experiment, but it's also can be a great check on yourself and your own personal learning to be able to say, here's what we're aiming for. So I'm not going to run through all of these, but there are so many reasons to try arts integration in science. And the biggest one is really, I'd say, about that inclusivity piece, which touches on all of these things from engagement to self-confidence, giving different ways of expressing understanding, or of giving students knowledge, or helping them to engage in things. I've linked some extra articles in there if you want to dive into it a little bit more. To me, one of the best parts about it is that I find that it's really fun. And like I said, teachers who are having fun tend to also make space for students to have fun. And obviously, just one piece on that, I'm sure a lot of you know, is, when your students are having fun, they're relaxed, their stress levels are low, they're going to take in a lot more. They're going to be much more open to the learning. They're going to retain a lot more of that information than when they're, stressed out and overworked and just trying to cram things in. So I think that's, if you keep hearing me say fun, that's a part of it that's really important to me, is the student well-being as well as the teacher well-being. So moving forward, and all the examples I'm going to kind of throw at you now are really about finding small openings. So I don't want you to be thinking at any point like, oh my gosh, I have to do this all and do it perfectly. It's really about finding those small spaces within your own practice, what you're already doing or what you want to do, and kind of moving into this as slowly or quickly as you want. And then also I've been having to put these into any workshops or presentations I give. I feel like this year is just like it's so, how do we even describe this world except with the 2020 hashtag, I suppose. But the really important things here is knowing that like we're all learning how to do this. So if you're teaching in person, you're going to have to take all of those safety precautions that you would need to take anyways because of COVID. And it takes a little more work than traditionally doing arts-based education. So definitely planning ahead, being patient, being creative, so that you can all stay safe. Right? Sometimes it requires creating some new tools. I'll show you some of the things I've been using as we go through, but it's really just about, being flexible and learning as we go, which now I guess we've all been doing for close on 10 months, it feels like. All right, so before I dive into a useful framework and then some examples, anybody have any questions? All right, so for me, when I'm trying to learn something new, it's often helpful. Maybe I'm corny, maybe I'm old school, but I really like acronyms to like help me remember stuff, to get it into my brain. So when I'm thinking about getting started with arts-based integration, I'm thinking about this idea of same. I used to live in India, and that's something that we say there a lot, like, oh, it's same but different, which means like it's kind of almost exactly the same, but a little bit different. And everybody knows what it means if you just go, oh, same. So what you're trying to do with arts integration is not doing one more thing. So I'm not saying to you like, do everything you're doing and arts-based integration. I'm saying keep doing what you're doing, but a little bit differently. So same can stand for subject, active engagement, materials, and examples. So to dive into those a little bit more here, subject, you're really asking yourself, what content or objective am I trying to address with my students? How can art help? All right. in this case, we're talking about science, but you can get more specific to talking about maybe it's life science, maybe it's a particular standard, maybe it's a big idea, maybe it's a driving question. But so how can art help me teach my subject? Active engagement, how can I get my students moving, thinking, seeing, and hearing in a different way? And this gets at that piece that, it's easy to think that arts-based integration is just drawing or making something, but it can also be dance. I have definitely used dance and acting in my science classes with like success beyond what I thought. It's also about opening up space just for body movement that's maybe not as integrated. It's about getting outside, can be artful. So really keep your mind open to what art actually means. Materials is pretty straightforward, but this is, what materials can I use to inspire students to express or build their knowledge through the arts? So things that are different than just like a paper and a pen, even if you're short on supplies, maybe you've got some really cool colored markers and some colored pencils. Maybe it's using natural materials that you're collecting for free and incorporating those into your teaching and learning. So I'm not asking you to go out and buy a whole bunch of things, but it is saying to yourself, okay, how can I do things a little bit differently? And then of course there's the examples. So what examples can I provide to stretch students' imagination? And so this is more of that artistry piece and those forms of representation piece, right? Saying to our students, I'm not just going to, give you examples that are a journal article or a slideshow that I'm going to show you. I'm going to fill in the blank. It's also about asking them to create different sorts of things to represent their own work. So going back to that kind of, you take a test, a quiz, or you make a PowerPoint, what are some of the other ways that we can stretch our students' imagination and our own to really engage our thinking in learning in a different way? Cool. And then when we're talking about opportunities for integrating in the arts, I could just say to you, like, it's every opportunity, do it all the time. But it can be a lot easier to sort of wrap your mind around, okay, maybe it's a one-off activity. Maybe it's something daily because I'm really keen to incorporate this daily. Maybe you're just saying, I want to try it out. And I think I'd be interested in a formative assessment, right? Just a one-off thing. So you're acting something out, you're dancing your answer, you're writing a quick haiku, you're reading, listening, drawing. So that's another way. And then there's also the big project. So like I said, I'm a project-based specialist, so that's exciting to me, but I also know that that's not where a lot of people are. It also takes a lot of time to do project and big summative assessments. But they can be really rich and something to kind of keep off in the distance if you're interested in that sort of teaching. So I'll give you an example for each one of these. And again, feel free to stop and ask any questions you have as I'm going. Hopefully I'm not moving too fast. All right. So in terms of a one-off example, what I've provided here is something you might use as a unit or a lesson provocation, right? So that thing to launch you into a new project or into a new topic of study. And in this case, I'm going to ask you for about 1.5 minutes of your active engagement. So again, you're going to need to have that paper and pencil. Amber, you're in luck this time because you actually get to see what you're drawing. All right. But so I've been really having fun with field sketching in the virtual realm because, and I think from what I understand in Kansas, most of you are actually teaching in person. Is that right? Yeah, kind of, sort of some. Yeah. So, and this is something I've actually brought this into my own classroom, and then I used to do this so that we could have an experience together as a class before going out into the field. And then I've adapted it to the virtual world, and it's pretty fun. So what I'm gonna have you do, I'm gonna play this video. It's about 1.5 minutes long. And I just want you to make some quick sketches of what you see. I'll give you a few more prompts as the time goes on. Don't worry really, 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 I'm not even going to ask you to show it this time, but don't worry at all about what it looks like, about it being perfect, anything like that. I just want you to focus on capturing, I guess, like the essence, the shapes, the spacing of things as we watch this video. So like I said, it'll be about 1.5 minutes, and I'll give a few prompts throughout to keep you thinking. All right, so as you're drawing, be sure to take a look and then look again. So keep your eye open for any details that you maybe missed in that first glance. And you can see now it's got a different angle. Are you able to capture how the shape has changed? All right, see if we can get this back up here. Am I still screen sharing? Just double checking. Perfect. All right, so I'm moving through this quickly so I can give you all lots of examples, but this is something I would actually carry out for, you know, depending on the age of the students, 3 to 5 to even 10 minutes to give them time to really, you could play it on loop or maybe make a longer video, but to really allow them the time to practice sketching, prompting them to look for details, and then starting to go deeper, especially if this is a unit lesson or provocation, to say, all right, after you've done some observation, what questions do you have about what you see? Right? You could also go in the other direction and say, what do you already know or think you know about what you see? Right? So kids are writing down, it's a butterfly. Maybe they know a little bit about, oh, it's a thistle. Oh, it looks like summer. And so you can collect all of those. You can collect their questions. What is that thing that comes out of its mouth? How do its wings move? How do butterflies stay warm? All these different things. And then right there, just through this simple field sketching exercise, you've helped students to start looking at observations, comparing the diversity of life in different habitats. Yay, we've hit on a science standard that we're really keen to touch on. You've also got them actively engaged, thinking, drawing, interacting with this. How much better if you were doing this in real life, right? You're actually going out into the field. The materials, we're using something that works for us in the setting. And the example is real life, it's local, it's place-based. So it's really getting those students to make the connections that are surprising, right? So much of their science education is going to be text, or not always, but can just be these textbook things that are nothing they've seen in their daily life. And now all of a sudden you've given them this artful representation. They're going, oh, I saw that butterfly just down the road the other day. Maybe it's the same one, right? So these are some of the ways that arts-based teaching and learning can really be used in a one-off setting. Of course, you could build an entire project around this or use this practice over and over and over again, but this is a really good one, I think, for getting things started. Science notebooks, I think I love to bring up to teachers as they are really developing their methods of teaching or how they might engage with other educators around science education, because science notebooks are one of the most powerful ways. Leonardo da Vinci, actually, we all recognize this guy, but he called them his records of curiosity. And he pretty much carried his journals around with him everywhere he went. And you can see that he not only was drawing those inventions that we know so well, but he also was spending a lot of time just outside, observing the world around him, really not putting any limits on what he was paying attention to. Now, in your actual classroom, there are so many practical ways to do this, but getting into the daily habit of keeping a science notebook can be what's really useful, because then when you ask your students, to go do a field observation or to record their findings from a lab report, they're already ready to really engage in their science in a different way. So I put up several examples here of different ways you can incorporate art. And this is pretty straightforward. And I realize now I've given you quite a few examples that are more drawing based. So I'll have to think about that in some of the examples I give. But you can see how it can be so useful in so many different ways. Anything from just a color chart where you're having students create colors to describe different things, making recordings, doing field observations, or getting into the more specific microscopy and really deep observations through detailed drawing. What's really cool, there's a book that I love, it's actually called Field Notes, and it's all these essays by scientists, and they're talking about how art helped them to be better scientists. And one of my favorite ones is a story of a scientist who was observing these lizards and realized after a day of sketching, he went back and somebody was looking, they're like, do those lizards have feet? And all of his sketching hadn't included the feet of the lizard. And so when he went back into the field the next day, he took a lot of care to pay attention to what were their feet doing, what do they look like? But in that way, instead of just taking notes, right, and just thinking in that sort of cerebral way, that the arts actually pushed him to be a better scientist. For formative assessments, there are a lot of different ways. I'll put up a few other examples, but I thought this was an exciting way and also easy. And I think easy is okay, especially if it means that you as a teacher can maintain your own sanity. So this is just a picture that I took of the lake near where I live. So if I was teaching, students might recognize this and say, oh, I've been there, I know that beach. But what's really cool is you could use a simple picture to do a formative assessment of the water cycle, right? So you show them a picture or you give them a picture, you say, all right, go ahead and label the different parts of the water cycle. Maybe your learner needs those words, so you say, here's the words, go ahead and use those to fill in. Maybe you specifically put blanks, exactly where you want to draw their attention. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Other examples of formative assessment, I play a game called States of Matter Freeze Tag. You should learn it if you don't know it, but it's really fun. Also, cell poems. I actually have some here from my first year of teaching, but I had the students write poems about cells, and it was this great practice in metaphorical language that I did with the humanities teacher. And the students came away having a better understanding of cells because they had to think metaphorically, because they had to think, well, what is a mitochondria like? What is the cell wall like? And then, of course, like reading and listening and drawing. This is a great thing that, if you're somebody who, I love read aloud. I do read aloud even in like my high school science classes, and kids don't ever seem to get sick of it. But what I think is really cool, if you want to check for listening or check for, if they've missed something or for key concepts, is to do read, listen, and draw. So while you're reading, or maybe you're listening to a podcast or a story, you can be drawing and sort of illustrating as you go, or modeling, as you go, so that you're really checking for understanding, but not just by saying, okay, what did we hear? How did Jenny respond, right? There's lots of different ways we can do this. And then here's the project or summative assessment, right? So this is the big picture thing. If we're moving kind of on that continuum from the one-offs to the daily, the formative assessment, then the big project or summative assessment, like I said, it takes a lot of time. Don't get too overwhelmed with some of the examples I've given. So these two pictures here are from some masks that we created in a project. This was actually really a blend of science and maths. So we were doing a bunch of around ratios and our faces and like the golden ratios, as well as looking at mixtures. So creating the paper mache, that sort of thing. And then these were actually used in, we put on the Odyssey, as this was a big project that incorporated the theater, humanities, and my math science class, and it was a lot of fun. But I just show these because they're, you know, they're cool. The kids are so proud of them. They could talk all about ratios and how you find ratios and how you create scales, and that was exciting. And then they also had a lot of fun wearing them. This is one of my all-time favorite projects. It's the Soul Food project, and it was just all about getting students. We did a lot in chemistry, so this was middle schoolers, and we were getting into food science. And so it was a lot around chemistry, but also getting into biology and nutrition. But what we did is we did it all through food. And the final product was making a class cookbook. I don't think I brought it with me, that the students told a story about their favorite, so their soul food, which they then also, along with the story, they wrote out the recipe. We used, this was way back before like apps and stuff, but but they had to use like a thing on the actual computer to calculate all the calories that and the macronutrients. They did that, the, you know, writing directions and what's that's like, and then they had to make connections to some of the learning that we did, and that was really fun, just as a big summative project that was very art filled, but also complemented the science in so many ways. And this one was arts because we had the writing with the designing of the actual layout of the template that they used. The students helped with that in their design thinking class, and then also cooking, right? The art of cooking, which was super exciting. And then this was another project that I've done with students. It's called the Furry Tales Project, where we choose different animals to look at and learn more about their adaptations, and then writing and illustrating books that help younger kids to learn about adaptations and what adaptations are and what evolution is. And I really love this one. I love this page in particular. So, hiding in the tall brown grass, playing a trick on me, I see spots moving, alas, but I only count 3. The grass and earth are good camouflage. They look like a spotted collage, and you can see the little faces down in the corner. Cool. Phew. That was a lot of talking from me. Hope it was super useful. I'm happy to have any questions. Here's your, you know, wrap up, just as a reminder to find those small openings. Don't get stressed out and try to do it all at once. You got a framework if you need to wrap your head around, how do I even get started? So thinking about your subject, how to get actively engaged, what materials you're using, the examples. And it's really about teaching and expressing knowing through the arts. That's what arts integrated teaching is. So not losing sight of the content that you want to cover, but doing so in a meaningful way through the arts. Cool. Any questions? Anything that you'd like to know or add in?
Something I'll add. So no one has ever used the word artistic to describe me, ever. And is I have the like fine motor skills of a gorilla, but not even the like termite fishing ability. But for me, the value I saw in it in the classroom in integrating art, especially my first position was 6th through 8th grade, and like teaching 6th grade as a science teacher, the kids that came in and liked science, you have like demigod status of like the science teacher, and we get to like do all these things. And then you had the kids that came in and they just like that wasn't their thing. And to me, the goal was that anyone that came into my class, that they could see themselves doing science. Now, like they weren't going to necessarily like see themselves doing science the same way, because it's just not, scientists don't all do things the same way. And so for me, I view a lot of things through the lens of equity. and how can we make sure everyone has a fair shot at these experiences. And so that's really what brought me towards trying to include art. And so the one that I did a ton was a lot of the drawing, because what students would want to do, especially middle school kids or any of them that have a phone, is like, can we just take a picture of it? Like, no. Now, I mean, like there's some cases where like, sure. It's like, no, because when you're drawing it, all of that back and forth, you're taking in a lot more than if you're just like, cool, took a picture of it, done. Because like I've taken pictures of all sorts of forms that I know nothing on, because I'm just like, cool, I've got a picture of it. I never need to like pay attention. And so that was the thing that brought me to it. So if you're in the spot of like, I'm not an art person, I get that, because that's honestly like still where I'm at. Like I still don't really see myself as an art person, but I do see it as a very powerful tool to making sure that kids that come into your room and don't think science is their thing can be like, oh, but you mean I can do it that way? And one of the things I point back to a lot is, as I kind of started from a natural history background, and for like centuries, that's literally all that was folks going out places and drawing or painting or whatever. I mean, that was like how science was done. So I know people get in like, well, when do we have time to do the real science stuff? Like, this is like centuries worth of real science, was people sitting in a field drawing things.
Absolutely. And I mean, even further back than that. So one of the people that I draw a lot of inspiration from is a scientist. Her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she's also an author and a poet, and just such a gifted writer and storyteller. But she tells a story about going into her science classes when she first went to university. And I should back up and say she is of the Potawatomi Nation. And so she considers herself an indigenous scholar. And she went and showed up and was said, well, why do you want to study botany? And she said, oh, I want to know why the asters and the goldenrods are so beautiful together. And her professor said, well, then go study art. And she was like, wait, what? No, because she'd spent her entire life studying plants and how they work and how they integrate together. And it ends up, she goes through years and years. She goes and gets her PhD in botany. And it turns out there's a very good reason that the aster and the goldenrods are so pretty together. Why? They actually get more pollinators to visit them when they have the contrasting colors, those complementary purple and gold. So they scientifically can show that more visit it. But her professor was unable to see that and tried to squash down what we would call traditional ecological knowledge. So not just the field studies, but actually the cultural knowledge that has been embedded in many cultures that help us make sense of the world, that aren't always just that narrow-minded, this is science, you must be objective, it must go this way. So I think that's, she's really great if you're looking for inspiration into the integration of science and art in a really meaningful way. But it also ties into what you were saying, Matt, just about this equity piece and how this arts integration with science in particular is it's not a new thing, even if it feels new. So.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or anything for Emily? I know we're at 8 o'clock, and if you guys are like me, you'll fall asleep in like 12 minutes. So to save you the embarrassment of falling asleep on your keyboard, which I did during the conference call last month, I think it was. I woke up to the hold music and like, oh, I haven't voted on anything in a while. But so anyway, any other questions any of you have?
I think Brad put a comment in the chat, which is really useful, just about that, getting back into that there's more than one idea to learn, or more than one way to learn, and more than one way to show your knowing. And so, yeah, even if you don't consider yourself a really creative person, which is what you wrote in there, like, I'm not a real creative person, it's really useful to recognize that even if you aren't, you might have students that are, and you might have colleagues that are. So that's awesome, Brad. Thanks.
Well, and you'll sometimes find students that you did not think were good science students, and then once they have a different way of showing their knowledge, you're like, oh no, they're a great science student, they're a really poor test taker, which has happened to me. So anyway, any of the ideas she shared are things that are fair game to use in assignments, lesson plans, any of that. If you think of questions later, I'm more than happy to pass them along, or you know, just make up an answer. Like, oh, I think what she would say is. But anyway, thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you have great evenings and easy ends of the week, as easy as, you know, weeks are right now. So